Can everybody see the screen?
Yeah, that's great.
Is that okay?
Yeah.
Lovely, thank you. Shall I start then?
Yeah.
Lovely. Well, welcome everybody to this RDS seminar on Introduction to Translational Research and the NIHR's i4i funding stream. My name is Roy Harris. I'm a Senior Advisor in Translational Research for RDS East Midlands. My background is, or has been for many years, in medtech device development, IP and commercialization. So today we're going to look at introduction to the translational research very briefly. Then we've got Edwin Tucker to talk about NIHR support for healthcare technologies and the i4i funding stream. Then it comes back to me to how to put together successful applications. Unfortunately, today, Jane Fearnside, who is supposed to help me with this section, has been taken ill, so I will try my best to cover her slide presentation. We then finish with a very interesting researcher perspective on translational research and the i4i funding stream from Professor Luca Marciani. After these talks, we will have a short Q&A session. So any questions, please put in the chat. So I will start with Introduction to Translational Research. If you go onto Google, you'll see 1,001 definitions and meanings and everything else for translational research. I picked this one out because it seems to cover what I talk about, and I think what people would expect translational research to be. So in translational research, scientific discoveries are moved along a virtual path from the laboratory into the real world. What are the reasons to innovate? Normally, researchers like yourselves will come up with ideas and try to develop them, move them towards the commercial market. And this is pushing your idea into the healthcare sector. But there are other drivers that actually pull ideas out. And these are listed here. I won't go into them in great detail, but for SMEs, competition can be very important because they need to keep ahead of the game. This is keep their heads afloat. Technology changes can be really big drivers of product development. If you look at things like 3D printing, artificial intelligence for digital technologies, the marketplace is very important because feedback from customers and the medical profession can drive product development and product improvements. Government legislation is also important. You can see this in the last 18 months with COVID, where vaccine development was pushed forward, COVID testing was pushed forward. The last one is a strange one and really goes with entrepreneurial input, and that's curiosity and laziness. Laziness here is not can't be bothered to do it, but really there must be a better or an easy way to do this. So there's lots of drivers that can push the translational research pathway forward. The question I'm often asked is, what's the difference between basic research and applied research when you're talking about the translational research pathway? Basic research is normally researchers in the lab, trying to answer questions. There's no commercial output from it. However, if a commercial product is recognized, then it becomes applied research. And between those two, that's where you try to get onto the translational research or the innovation pathway. there's two gaps here. The first gap is trying to get out of the basic applied research bubble into the innovation pathway, and this can be lack of understanding from the scientist, not knowing what to do next, and also inadequate funding to get to the stage where you can actually enter the pathway and move forward into implementation. Gap two, people will recognize this as the valley of death, and I know this will be brought up later on in a later talk. And the one good thing about the NIHR funding stream is that it covers this valley of death and hopefully helps to get products into the commercial arena. About 70 to 80% of products die at this stage, and many of the funding streams only go halfway along this pathway, so leave you in the middle of this valley, precariously positioned. What does the innovation pathway look like? This is a very simplified overview. It's really getting out of basic research with a proof of principle or a prototype and developing that prototype, evaluating it in early clinical studies, which could be safety or tolerability or early feasibility studies, to get to a stage where the commercial market, the manufacturers and distributors will take interest, can scale up that production and move into the healthcare sector and NHS adoption arena. So briefly, it's capturing the idea, managing the idea through the, as I say, the valley of death, and getting it into a position to exploit. Here are a few funding streams, but I know these will be covered in much more detail by our next speaker. I would now like to invite Edwin Tucker, who's a senior program manager for the innovation team at NIHR, if he will kindly share his thoughts on NIHR support for healthcare technologies and the i4i funding stream.
Thanks very much, Roy. Hopefully everyone can hear me. I'll need to share my screen as well, please.
I can't get out of mine. Oh, there. Thank you. Thank you, Edwin. Over to you.
Is that showing full screen?
Yes, that's good.
Okay, wonderful. Thanks very much, Roy. Good afternoon, everyone. So I'm Edwin Tucker. I'm a senior program manager in the innovations team. And today I'll be talking to you about the Invention for Innovation, so i4i funding program, and how it can support medtech innovators. So this is what you may hope your innovation will look like and plan for: a straight road A to B with no obstacles and a clear path. However, generally your journey may look a bit more what's on the right hand side. So a bit of confusion, complexity, various stakeholders involved, and challenges and obstacles along the way. And especially if there's a lack of signposting, then this is equally confusing. Some of the challenges you may face will, along your journey can include the complexities and understanding new and changes of governmental regulations, legal frameworks, new standards. Funding opportunities as well may keep changing. There could be a lack of awareness of initiatives like Health Tech Connect, for example, to get your digital devices into the NHS. Also, the support network for innovation is less well developed than that for research. We have many great scientists and inventors, but they're less well supported to turn their ideas into businesses. Also, the NHS itself may not have as big a risk appetite as we would hope for. So they you would need to sort of demonstrate a real strong validation in your innovation as well. And finally, there's generally an imbalance between funding at the research and development stages versus the spend that is used for adoption and implementation. So that's kind of just setting the scene a little bit. So now I'll just give an overview of the innovation team and the broad, and I'll touch on a few other sort of resources available at the NIHR, but I will focus mainly on the funding. So the categories of research that we cover in our funding is on the right-hand side. These are the various funding programs which we cover, but I'm just going to focus on the Invention for Innovation one. The research areas span from sort of early stage translational development, including medical devices and diagnostics development, as well as small clinical trials, efficacy trials, and also health technology assessments. So that will be sort of comparing new technology and therapies with the gold standards. So these are our research areas. The funding is provided through a variety of funding programs listed on the right. As I mentioned, for today, we'll focus on the i4i one. In terms of funding for projects and programs we provide, the possible research areas, translational developments, as listed in the research areas, and we're going to cover all of this in the next few slides. So Roy already shared a similar flow chart for funding landscapes. This is where we sit as, I'm not sure if I got my mouse can show where those are coming through, but we very much sit in the middle bracket of the translational funding pathway. So just a bit beyond basic research, but before adoption and spread. And the i4i Connect and Product Development Awards in blue here, as well as the Challenge Awards is what I'll be focusing on today. Just for awareness as well, we also manage the AI in Health and Care Awards, so the phases 2, 3, and 4, as well as the SBRI Healthcare Award as well. Yes, as you can see, this slide just demonstrates what a sort of complicated network of funding that is available, but it's they're focused for different parts of the landscape. Okay, so the actual NIHR i4i program itself. So the aim of the program is to advance the development of innovative medical technologies for patient benefit. So Roy touched on patient benefit again, and this is a similar theme that goes throughout our funding. And how do we do this? Well, it's by providing a focused source of translational R&D funding and structured support for academics, clinicians, and SMEs as well in England. We generally support medical devices, in vitro diagnostics, and certain digital health technologies. We encourage collaborative projects, so work with another organization, whether it be a trust or a university or an SME, and your projects need to have sort of demonstrated strong proof of principle or proof of concept, as well as have a clear path towards adoption and commercialization. So touching on again what Roy mentioned earlier. And so the expected outputs would be an advanced or clinically validated prototype medical device, technology, or intervention. The overall aim, and the key aims for this funding is to de-risk the projects, to make them more attractive for follow-on funding, either through public funding or private funding, if you're with an SME. Again, this is the Valley of Death, which Roy touched on. So the function really is of the i4i program is to fill that gap you mentioned with funding, but it's for research which is a bit too advanced for basic research, but which is too risky for private investors, for example. So it acts as a bridge for early stage medtech to de-risk these projects to make them more attractive for follow-on funding. And the figures on the right just shows the number of contracts awarded and the amount invested to date. So within the i4i award, there are 3 funding streams. We have PDA, so that's Product Development Award, and that is generally for 3 years. It's a collaborative award, so any of the 3 organisations, higher education institution, NHS Trust or SME may apply, but we would expect them to have a sort of collaboration. There's no upper limit to the funding requested, but you know, like most funding applications, I suppose it's all down to the value of money. Going to be up for 3 years, and the timelines are generally about from the deadline to the outcome is about 6 months, but I'll go through the timelines later. We also have a Challenge Award. This is comparable to PDA in terms of eligibility, in that any of the 3 organisations I mentioned may apply, no upper limit, collaborative, similar timescales as well. However, these must be CE marked devices, and the purpose of the Challenge Award is to, it's themed, but our theme is real world implementation. So we would expect at least a trust to be a collaborator. It could be multiple sites, of course, depending on the device or innovation that's being tested. So that's to gather real world clinical evidence. The third award is our Connect Award, and this is a relatively new award. This is aimed at SMEs only, or industry. We obviously encourage collaborators as well, but that's not a prerequisite. There is a cap of £150,000, and it is for 12 months. It's a much faster turnaround because obviously we're aware that cash flow is more concerning for SMEs, so we do try and have a faster turnaround for this. And I'll go through what we would fund for these awards as well in a bit. So just touching on the application process itself, all of our awards are 2-stage processes, 2-stage application processes. There's an expression of interest at stage 1 for Connect, so that's a sort of short, just a few pages summary with various sections. And for PDA and Challenge, it's an outline. But if you're invited to the shortlisting and progress to stage 2, then for the stage 2 application for Connect, this will involve a business plan, because all of the organizations will be SMEs, plus a 3-minute video pitch. Whereas if it's a PDA or Challenge Award, then this will be a much more fuller application. And that application will be peer reviewed by experts in the field. There will be opportunities for rebuttals before the committee day, and then on the day itself, you'll be invited to provide a presentation. Regarding timelines, as I mentioned, Connect is a much faster turnaround, so it's 4 months from outline, when you submit your outline, until the shortlisting meeting. And then conversely for PDA and Challenge, it's slightly more longer. It's about 2 months from the outline to shortlist. So that shortlist is when you're assessed by the panel provisionally to get on the shortlist. And then if you're invited to stage 2, that takes a few months more. So that 7 months is actually from the outline until the decision. So it's a bit longer. What we do fund, there's a much more extensive list on our website, but for Connect and PDA, it's R&D, health economics, regulatory, and IP and commercial. It's generally a mix of a bit of everything. It's unlikely to just focus on one of these areas, whereas Challenge, it's evaluations in healthcare, implementation strategy, again, health economics and IP and commercial. There's obviously a list of what we do not fund, so basic research, studies with animals or animal tissues. If you did need that, you'd have to secure source externally. I mean, of course, you could run in parallel with the funding if you've received it, but it's just, you wouldn't be able to cost for it. And also systems improvements for hospitals. What makes a good application? I believe we may touch on this later, but perhaps I can just cover some of this now. So this is what you'd be assessed on as well, and all of this is in our guidance online. So you need to make sure you articulate well all 9 of these points, demonstrate proof of concept, have a clear work plan with so the proof of concept, with literature or any existing data perhaps that you've got, or evidence that your intervention will do what you claim it will do. Project plan, have that clear with work packages, deliverables, any milestones, to demonstrate a clinical need. So make sure that you're articulating what healthcare need is is required, and how you're going to plan to address this. Articulate well the patient benefit. This is a strong point throughout all the applications and the projects themselves. Have a good multidisciplinary team, and if you're lacking any skills, then of course, you know, bring in subcontractors to fill in those positions, or however you see fit. Have a good NHS adoption and strategy plan, as well as IP and commercial. So whilst we realise that sometimes it's quite hard to have this planned at the start, it should still be explored and included in the application. So that would make it a strong application. Value for money, of course, that's important, and patient and public involvement. So do include patient publics, the patients and the public as part of your application, either as a co-applicant or, you know, have focus groups, because they're the ones that will ultimately be, if it's a medical device, they may be the ones using it, so they need to inform your research and usability, and you know, if it's a wearable, for example. Just to give an overview of the sort of success rates, or how many applications we review. So around a third that apply from stage 1 get shortlisted, but once you're shortlisted, you've got that, you know, there's around 50% to get funded. So it is extremely competitive. Yes, and it's 15% from stage 1 to getting funded. So what this shows is just a snapshot of our portfolio. Around 61% are gathering clinical data evidence, so engaging in clinical trials, and, you know, around 22,000 participants in those trials. All of our projects involve patients and the public, which is, as I mentioned earlier, I'll stress again, this is a core element to a lot of successful applications in i4i funding. 760 collaborations, new jobs created. 41% of our projects have achieved CE marking. There's a higher percentage which are planning for CE marking and are about to, well, as part of the research project. We've had 2 IPOs, and the funding has leveraged additional investments as well to our companies. Just to give a little breakdown of where applicants apply from. So on the left-hand side is by organisation type. So yeah, it's probably expected that universities are probably more familiar with the funding system, so they make up half of our funded portfolio. But actually, there's an equal split between SMEs and trusts as well. And on the right-hand side is a sort of distribution geographically of where applicants come from. Just to touch on some case studies, some projects that we've developed. So we have, oh, it's not on here, but there's a company called Sense Biodetection, which is developing an instrument-free point-of-care test kit for respiratory diseases. Corterio, they're designing a portable scanner for rapid diagnosis of monitoring traumatic brain injuries. Oxite, which is on this slide here, they marketed a portable augmented vision smart glasses to boost functional sight for people who are blind or partially sighted. Therapy Box here on the left is a speech rehabilitation app. This is a good example of a company that applied for i4i Connect funding and have subsequently applied for PDA funding and were awarded. I should emphasize that just because you have got for Connect doesn't mean there's any sort of favoritism going on. It's still assessed independently. Quanta on the right hand side here, they've been quite active during the COVID because they've developed portable dialysis machines which have been being used, and Creo at the top there, that's one of the companies that had an IPO a few years ago and are doing well. I'm just coming to the end now, but I'll just touch on sort of the access to facilities and expertise. So we have the mix. So these are the medtech and in vitro diagnostic cooperatives. So these are 11 centres of excellence and expertise across England. Each centre has an expertise and dedication in different areas. So for example, we've got mental health or trauma management or brain injury here in Cambridge. These can support the development and evaluation of medical technology and enable generation of evidence necessary for implementation and adoption. They can help support many aspects, including health economics, usability studies, clinical evidence gathering, and clinical evidence gathering for clinical regulatory requirements, and also support with commercialization and dissemination activities, and also can help find some patient groups, as well as supporting early stage protocols. So do reach out to the mix early on to sort of garner their support and what resources they can help with. So that was expertise to facilities and experts, and now I'll just touch on support for delivery of trials in the NHS. So this is the Clinical Research Network, or CRN, and also the Study Support Service. So they support the design and implementation of clinical studies in terms of the workforce. So there's 15 local CRNs, each affiliated to a trust to support clinical trials. So do reach out to them as well if you're expecting that your work needs to include some trial work or engagement with patients. They can help mobilize nurses for clinical trials, protocol development and design, clinical trial monitoring as well, and also help with costings of the trial. So do engage with them early on and sort of explain your plans to them and to see how they can support. They can also support with the recruitment of your trials as well. Yes, well, the emphasis here is that I guess it's all a free service. So do reach out using the various email inboxes, etc., and start your conversations with them. And just to talk about the upcoming calls for funding, you would still be in time if you were to apply for a product development award. So we're opening that on the 20th of October, so a month away. And then you can see the timelines, which I sort of articulated earlier on. Challenge Award is opening in November. So this is for the CE marked and later stage awards. And the Connect call, we actually just closed on the 14th of September. So we're in the middle of reviewing them at this minute, but we anticipate, well, we've always had Connect once a year. So the next time will be in August next year. I should also mention for Product Development Award, whilst we open in October, we also open in April the following year. So there's 2 dates each year so far that we've opened the call. So if you don't make this one in October, the next opportunity should be in April. And generally the same is for Challenge as well. So next call will be April time. Okay, I'll just leave this up here. I've only spoken about the i4i award, so do email any queries there to that inbox. It's i4i@nihr.ac.uk. There's quite a lot of guidance as well on our website as well. And that's the end of my presentation. Thanks very much, Roy.
Lovely, thank you, Edwin. It's really good to see the support that NIHR give, and I would recommend anybody who's got questions to go to NIHR. They're very approachable, and the sooner you get your answers, the sooner you can get your applications together and in. It's also interesting that there are some successes with companies in that producing the products. People often say to me, well, they never go anywhere, but you've shown that they do, and it's good to see that. So thank you very much, Edwin. Please stay for the Q&A at the end, and if anybody's got any questions on that presentation, please put them in the chat. Right. Right, the next section in this seminar is how to put together successful applications. This is not how to write the applications, it's what elements you should be looking for and gathering the information to go into your applications. Edwin has just mentioned several aspects that you should be looking at. And start with, we go back to the patient benefit. That's always at the heart of these translational research funded projects. And there's simple questions that you can answer very quickly. Is your product that you're trying to make, is it innovative? Is it, you know, is it a new idea, a new concept? Because it's no good funding Me Too products. It's got to be something novel that can go into the pathway and onto the healthcare market. The question that's often asked is there a clinical need, and is it a long-lasting clinical need? And this is a very difficult question to answer on many fronts, because things change rapidly. You need to do some research to establish you've got a clinical need, but also that it's going to outlast your, shall we say, 3-year funding and beyond that. Otherwise, it's not worth pursuing. Value for money is always cropping up, and you've got to be realistic when you cost up these programs, that you are sensible about it. This is public money for the i4i grant, and you know, NIHR want to see return, and if you waste their money, the return is going to be smaller, and funding for other products goes down. So when people come to me, they say, what do I need to look at? And there's a list of things. Again, Edwin has touched on this, and this is normally where new researchers go bleary-eyed, and it's the rabbit in the headlights, and think, I don't know anything about this, I'm a scientist. But as you will hear shortly, there's lots of support to back these elements up, and if you take it slowly, you can build up the application and the information needed for those applications. Now, going back to what Edwin was saying about the criteria that NIHR look for, again, if you break down, he did mention some of this, but you can break down each of these boxes into various sub-elements, shall we say. And again, it's a matter of sitting back, taking it easy, and working your way through which of these aspects is relevant to your project, your program, your product development. Risk, again, this has been mentioned. Funders expect some risk at the beginning, and what they also expect is that as you go through the program of research, that risk is reduced, that you know where the barriers may appear and how to mitigate against any risks that do arise. Sometimes these come at you from left wing, but you've got to be ready to deal with them, and risk management system is very important to have in your portfolio. Common failings, these are well, you can probably recognize a lot of these. Poorly written applications. The main cause of this is that people like to wait until 2 weeks before the deadline and think, I'll put an application together. That is not enough time to get information collated and presented in a way that is readable and understandable to reviewers, etc. Overambitious work plans. This is I've seen this on several occasions where people try to put 6 years of research into a 3-year work plan, and reviewers see through this straight away and it will be thrown out. So you've got to be sensible with what you're trying to achieve in that well, up to 3-year period of your product development and funding. Cost again. NIHR and other funders like to see the cost going into the team, that is the principal investigator and the co-ops, rather than being given to subcontractors who often over-egg the costings, and it really does up the total cost of that project, and it may lead to you again losing funding. Lack of intellectual property to protect your product, your technology. Without that, you will not get funding. So it's a very important thing to think about. You don't always need to have a patent on day one, but you need to show that a patent is feasible, that you can file a patent within a couple of months to protect your product. Patient public involvement. Now, when I started looking at supporting researchers several years ago, you could put a statement in saying, we have got a PPI group and they will help us with the project. Now that is not sufficient, and you really need to show that the PPI teams or PPI group, your layperson, they're integral to the team and the progression of the project and the development of the product. And they should be involved in all aspects of designing the product, looking at patient-facing documents, analysing the clinical data that is produced, and also disseminating results at the end. And one important aspect is the writing of the plain English summary. That should be done by a PPI group or a layperson, and should not involve any scientific jargon and big words that the ordinary person in the street would not understand. So it's a big involvement for patients and public. And this goes with the PPI is a poor understanding of end users' needs, and that not only includes the patient and the public, but also the NHS and the clinicians, the nurses, the medics who actually are going to use your device or your diagnostic. Don't underestimate your customers when putting that application together. And the commercial strategy, this is really a difficult thing to be able to state with certainty, this is what's going to happen, this is what we're going to do. But you need to be able to put forward a reasonable strategy of where you think your product can go, is likely to go, matches the market opportunity, matches the clinical need. And this also includes NHS adoption. And again, you can get help from external organizations and from RDS members to help you build this sort of strategy as you go through your project, your program of work. So starting the application, a lot of people dive in, they'll write the scientific abstract, they'll write the background to their research, and then suddenly somebody asks the question, what are you trying to do? And you should really start with, have a really good research question. This should be smart, so it should be specific and measurable, achievable, timely. It should be a single question. You shouldn't have either or. You shouldn't say, if this doesn't work, we'll do something else. It's got to be almost a single goal. And you've got to back this up with clear aims and objectives. So it's really managing your expectations of where you want to be at the end of shall we say, a 3-year project, but also going forward to other funding streams that can help with future clinical studies, and also where your commercial output is going to be. It's important, the team is very, very important. You can't do this by yourself. Edwin mentioned collaborating with organisations, especially the NHS, if you're an academic or an SME. You need to build a team with co-applicants that bring experience and expertise required to get your product through to the next stage, shall we say. It's also important to know who the right partners to collaborate with are. And early on in the process, you should be talking to the end users, which is quite often the PPI group, but it can be external groups as well, but also stakeholders. Stakeholders can influence where your project is going, and they can make it successful, but they can also derail it. So you need to know who the right stakeholders are to talk to. And you've got to manage your project and team. A lot of principal investigators, researchers try to manage the whole thing and get bogged down, and the project sort of not peters out, but it sort of loses focus. If that's the case, then it's good to get a project manager on board to help with the day-to-day running. It's also good to break down your project into smaller work packages. Get your team of experts to look after individual packages and build them up for the application. I'll come on to Gantt chart in a minute. So read guidelines. Edwin alluded to this. The NIHR website is full of good information. Not the easiest thing to get around, but persevere, and there's a lot of useful information there. And the other thing is seeking support, which I will talk a bit more about in a minute, but seeking that support as early as possible. Edwin said that the next i4i PDA call, stage 1, is, I think, the 8th of December. You should be looking at putting that application together now, and should be contacting your RDS or other advisors as soon as possible to so that you can get a quality application together. This has been covered, sort of building up the work packages, and what I want to do is how those work packages fit into a Gantt chart. I find Gantt charts very, very useful. It's a visual overview of what you're trying to do. If you add your work packages and put in the key outline deliverables, you don't want every deliverable. It may be that you're an expert with MS Project and your day-to-day project management, you're happy to have 40 deliverables for each work package. But when you put an application like this together, you need to keep it concise. You need to let the reviewers see what you're trying to achieve. So you've got to keep to the key deliverables. And also, Edwin alluded to milestones. These are very important because these are go, no go decision points. And the NIHR use these as stage gate payment points. So the go, no go in terms of you and your team could become pay or no pay. So it's very important to pick milestones that are achievable but realistic. So advice for researchers. I think know yourself and your own capabilities is a starting point. It's, you can't do everything on a translational research pathway project. You need to know where your skill lies and what skills you need to build up that team to support you. Know what your goal is, know what the clinical need is. We've discussed this. Know the marketplace, competitors and end users. Again, PPI is essential. You've got to have that involved in your project. Make sure the technology is protected. Make sure you offer good value for money. And this last comment is very important, I think, because people, researchers often write to their own kind, shall we say. If you're a scientist in cancer, you'll write a cancer application. But the reviewers who review your application can come from all aspects of life. They can be IP experts, they can be health economists, they can be PPI, lay people, they could be scientists who are in a totally different field to what you're in. So you've got to make sure that your application is understandable by everybody, basically. Right, now, say Jane Fearnside was going to give this. I will put her slides up and hopefully I can talk through what she was going to talk through. So please bear with me through this session. We only found out that Jane was ill an hour or so ago, so I've quickly run through this. So this is introducing the RDS and what the RDS can, how the RDS can support what we've been talking about today. So the idea is that to increase the number and proportion of high quality applications for funding, you can see there's various regions. You should contact your local region for support and any questions, and they'll be more than willing to help. We've covered this, a lot of this research proposal, but this just shows how thorough the RDS can be in supporting all elements of your research proposal. And the earlier you talk to them, the more support you will get. You may be given a single person to contact, but within RDS you've got all this expertise to help you out. So please use it. PPI, I keep going on how important this is. There is a fund that you can apply for to help with early stage PPI input. Again, if you contact RDS, they will be able to help you with this. This is really good for getting early stage PPI feedback, shall we say, to what you're trying to achieve with your project, your program, and your product development. So RDS have innovation champions, and across the regions there are various innovation champions who are very up to speed with translational research and are there to support and promote research involving innovation. I'm one of the innovation champions for RDS East Midlands, and this is my role, is to promote translational research, and I do use colleagues around me to help build up that support for you. The innovation champions work closely with NIHR and their funding programs, as outlined by Edwin, and also work in partnership with things such as the regional AHSNs, who can help with stakeholder analysis and NHS adoption, getting you ready for that stage. They don't at the moment get you adopted into the NHS, but they'll get you ready for that. And as mentioned, as MIX, NOCRI, etc., etc. So again, there's a lot of support out there to help you through this quagmire of trying to get all the information down on an application and moving forward with it. So I'll go through this very quickly. These are something called technology readiness levels. And as you can see, as you go from basic to applied, through the proof of concept or proof of principle, through what we're talking about with the i4i PDA grant, there are different levels of technology readiness. And as you go through these levels, you can see that early on there's a lot of risk to product failure, and that risk goes down, as we've previously discussed. And at the other end, as you go through to the higher TRL numbers, there's more chance of follow-on investment and adoption interest. So the i4i scheme really sits in the middle and really pushes you towards a better outcome, shall we say, at the adoption and commercialization stage. So I won't go into this because I think I've mentioned a lot of this. What can you expect in an advice session? And it's really covering all the questions that you've got, but helping you to put together that that quality application. And you can be signposted to organisations and other advisors, etc., to make sure that everything is covered. Proof of concept or proof of principle. This is really getting to a stage where you've got information showing that your product is viable. And it may be that you've got a large box of tricks on a bench with loads of wires, but it works and you can prove that it does what you want it to do. And then the program, the i4i program, is really getting that into a commercially viable product as opposed to minimal viable product. And of course, it's from there you're trying to reduce risk. You're trying to get a team around you to make sure that this is, it's feasible to get to the next stage. The questions down here, can you make it and can you sell it, is very important. And it all goes back to, knowing what the marketplace is. Does it want that product? And also, I'll go into the next slide. Here you've got what's called fuzzy front end and the forgotten back end. And here it's important. People tend to, when you're talking about, the i4i funding element of the translational research, they've got a prototype and they want to turn it into a commercially viable product. But you've got to think before that, what information you've got to help with that. You've got to think beyond that, sort of the market, the manufacturing scale up, and of course this commercial strategy to get this accepted into the marketplace, into the healthcare market. And again, technical development, the amount of development goes down as you go through the process, through the pathway, but the need for back-end activities goes up, and you need to know what they are going to be at the proof of concept stage, not at the commercialization stage. So it's trying to build that robust plan, knowing what your follow-on investment is, what's required in a follow-on investment to move it into the healthcare market. So here, these are, how do you support this commercialization? We should talk to your technology transfer office or your R&I office or your IP office, whatever it's called. If you're an SME, talk to your IP agent. And then always talk to the NIH Trust. They need to be on board. If you're doing any clinical studies, they're important to do that. AHSN, I've mentioned, who are very good at helping with commercial strategies and especially NHS adoption. The last thing here, barriers to market. Again, we've touched on this. You should know what the risks are and where the barriers are and how to overcome them. And again, plenty of support for this. So I will end there. And again, if you've got any questions, please put them in the chat. So I hope I covered Jane's talk adequately. The slides are there for you will be there for you to see anyway. I'd now like to invite Professor Luca Marciani, who I've worked with for several years, and he's not only had one successful i4i, but 2 successful i4is. And I've heard this story before. He tells a really nice story about the ins and outs, the ups and downs of i4i grants. And so if I may, could I pass over to you, Luca? And
thank you very much, Roy. I'll try to share my screen and see if it works. Has it worked? Yeah, can you see, Roy?
yes, that's fine.
Oh, brilliant. So thank you so much for having me. This is brilliant. It's one of the very few Zoom calls of the week I was looking forward to actually listen to, because it's very interesting. And I'm an academic. I'm in Nottingham, and I'm non-clinical, so I'm a physicist by background. And I was thinking last night about what I should be saying. So I've got a disclaimer to make. I've been fortunate and privileged to join the i4i team as a funding committee member about a year. And all I'm saying today is absolutely in a personal capacity. Edwin is the voice of NIHR. I'm speaking as a customer, not as a committee member. And I thought I'll share a thought. It has been bugging me for a few weeks about translational research, and I share a thought. And then I will just simply describe the magic study, the study that's been funded by 2 i4i PDAs, and bits and bobs of my application journey. I can't cover everything, but I'm going to hopefully reinforce some of the points that I was making. I'll just draw some conclusion. The thing that's been bugging me a bit is that we had some little money to distribute internally. It's not NIHR money, it's the internal money that we had here for translational research. And so we wanted to understand the environment and try to make a workshop on translational research, and then make a call, internal call in Nottingham to award some posts to promote this kind of research. And the survey indicated to us that only a fifth of people responding, and these are very skilled, very clever academics, clinician academics, had a good idea about how to progress their translational research. A third of all these people indicated that their knowledge was limited and they would have liked to learn more. So we organized our seminar, we then had a call for the priming posts and all the rest. But I remain with this idea that there is a cultural gap that needs to be filled in what it actually means doing translational research and what the funding available for doing these things is. So workshops like this are actually very precious. And Roy mentioned definitions of translational research. I got my favorite one comes from the Cooksey report, but they're all very similar. The primary objective is to do some good, to improve human health. But I've also managed to find the value of death. And I showed this to some of my students during the lectures. Is a drawing from a 2008 Nature article where they were discussing the coming of translational research, whereby the funding was basic or applied, and things fell through in the middle of the pathway. So, very simple word, translational, as far as I can think, is something that is in between those two things, and it doesn't actually fall through and manages to actually eventually reach patient benefit and also help the NHS from the point of view of the wealth and the cost and the organization. So that's my idea of translation. And into this journey, we actually had the fortune and the privilege of being funded to do some of this research. So I just have a simple slide to introduce the project. I'm not going to give you a science talk. I'm just going to touch on a few aspects, but you need to know where this is coming from. So I do work for the gastroenterology department, and our project is based on pediatric constipation. Will not make any puns about the forgotten back end that I was talking about. It's a big problem. It's affecting 14% of children at some point during their childhood, and 27,000 of them per year, only in England, end up in hospital because of constipation. Mostly diagnosed by symptoms. There are some diagnostic methods to look at how things travel to the gut. And one is the old X-ray radiopaque markers. We swallow a number of barium-soaked plastic markers. You take a picture and see how far they've gone at some point. And our idea was incredibly simple. This exam, particularly for children, has a risk of radiation because developing organs in children are more sensitive to radiation, and there's a longer lifespan to show radiation damage. And the picture, the X-ray frontal pictures, are actually not very good. They're quite blurry, and you can't quite often tell which bits of the bowel is which. So we went to NIHR and we said, can we be funded to do the modern equivalent of an old diagnostic method to take it into the modern diagnostic era? So we proposed to make some little mini capsule markers that would work exactly like the old ones, but they are actually not imaged with X-ray radiation. They are imaged with a safe MRI imaging. And because you swallow them, they are a class 2A ingestible medical device, which complicates your life with the regulations. And we promised to make a new medical device ready for regulatory approval. So that is actually the actual box of our device as it has reached the development now with the manufacturer. And we got trademark, we got about 7 patents. And inside the box, there are really nice blister packs where you can actually peel them off and then get the capsules. So that's where the stage we reached. And it's called MAGIC, magnetic resonance imaging pediatric constipation. So it's got a catchy name. And I was talking about the application, so I'll show you mine. And this is the old form, I need to say, before Edwin corrects me. The form has been dramatically simplified and improved over the years. This is the old form, and my stage 1 submission was 55 pages long. And as I was saying, there's a group of key elements, good idea, some IP protection. We set the scene well, and we did have an adult prototype working, so we could show that the principle works, and we had pilot data in adults, not in children, that it could work. I'll talk about PPI in a minute. And we made it good value for money, but a good work plan, and particularly we kept it very, very simple. Something that the experts often don't realize is that the panel and the people that look at the application, apart from the expert reviewers towards the end, they may not know anything about the specific field which you want to hit. And they need to understand, because if they don't understand, then your application has already lost a few brownie points. Application stage 1 gets screened by triaged by members of the panel. There's feedback, and if you make it to stage 2, that is brilliant, because Edwin was showing that there is actually a really good chance of funding. And my stage 2 was 87 pages longer. There's not much time to fill it up, and the adrenaline went up because we knew they were close to funding, potentially close to funding. And we had lots more practical questions to answer, things that we haven't necessarily got quite clear in our mind at the time: pricing, manufacturing, adoption, commercialization. And the feedback from the panel to answer, they are extremely good at drilling holes in your plan, so you've got to answer the questions. And when you pass stage 2, then there is the interview. This is a representation of the real interview room where I was presenting, and X marks the spot where I was standing in front of the panel. And at the point, the adrenaline goes through the roof because you're really playing for the project. And the secret of this thing, again, is to keep it simple and to practice. Talk to people who've been there, talk to people who've done interviews, talk to panelists who've listened to interviews. When you're playing for the project for real, then usually the institution comes in and there are more senior people coming to help and doing mock panels and pretend interviews so that you can practice. But you've got to be absolutely prepared by the time you stand on the X in front of the panel. And there's a bit of wait, and this is the real letter that I got at the time. At the bottom it says, you're recommended for an award. So this is the beginning of the journey, not the end. When you start getting funded, it's the beginning of the journey. And I'm going to touch now on a couple of aspects that in the project that I mentioned. And one is patient and public involvement. We promised in the grant that we will have PPI and they will actively participate in the design and the recruitment materials that will help dissemination. And we said we were going to get a parent co-applicant, a parent advisory group, and a young person's advisory group, being a device for children. We said we were going to talk to the children. And we did. These are, I should say that we do have permission to show the photos of the children, the consent from all of them. This is an example of the kind of activities that we've done with the panel. We looked at the capsules, we looked at transit. They've designed, let me see if I can get my little laser thing out. There it is. We did animations with animation specialists, and the children have actually written the scripts and voiced them for you can find them on YouTube if you Google them. And we did the ethics material. We have a website. They come with me to present the conferences. This is Amon here and Olivia presenting at the CRF conference. And this is Beth. They come to the management meeting. So we have a seat at the management meeting of the grant for our involvement. The story was so developed and so built into the project that we actually written it up as a paper, which got published in the Journal for Research Involvement. And it caught the attention of the funders. So we became one of the evidence alert for good practice in public involvement on the website of the NIHR. So very, very proud of it. And another thing that you need at some point in your project is to find someone that makes the things that you actually want to make, the design and making. Many of us are not actually very good at that. So I've actually gone around the country to try and find small, medium enterprise, usually smaller companies that get involved at this point. The large giants usually don't get involved with the early stages. And I generally traveled to go and sell the project to all these people. And when you get to talk to them, you're a potentially new customer for a big project or a big winning device. So they do listen. And it is genuinely a dragon's den. You got some senior CEOs, and in one case, they paid an academic advisor to come and listen to what I was saying. And you got your 10 minutes, and you need to sell them a project and trying to get them on board. We've been lucky. We had a design company from Leicester, they're really, really good, Renfrew Group. They started the initial work on the design of the capsules. You can see here at the bottom how we went from adult prototype, which is as big as one of your super vitamin pills, slowly and slowly towards a size that's comparable to the little radio pack markers that we wanted to copy. And then we've been very lucky to find manufacturer JB Technologies that done in Suffolk. And they've really taken the project to heart and built a relationship with them more than the customer or the project relationship. We built a friendship and a relationship. And they've taken over, developed all the idea further, especially did a fantastic job with the regulatory approvals, because when you then go to the MHRA for your trial, for your first trial, you need a ton of paperwork. These are all the documents that we were preparing to go to the MHRA to ask for permission to try the device in children. And the relationship went so well that they eventually became co-applicants in our second grant, and they are looking at the large volume production and commercialization. So manufacturing and design are key aspects that you need to cover. At some point during our project, we had 4 companies involved in the progressing of our project. And again, the funder noted, and we ended up in one of the research inspiration on collaborating with SMEs for innovation. So again, very proud of the work we've done as a team. At some point, then you got this thing in your hands and you need to try it. So we did the first in-child study of a new medical device. I can assure you it's not a thing for the faint-hearted. You need some help to do these things. And the primary point is to prove safety, acceptability, intended purpose, so that you can collect data later on for regulatory approvals. So we scanned 35 people with MRI scanner. there's a picture of me showing the mini capsules in the gut of one of our participants. Again, I got permission to show the photo from the back. And that seemed to work. I can show you here a little picture of the lower part of the gut, one 7-year-old participant patient with the mini capsules inside the gut. And again, we wrote it up and published, so we got evidence. Now we had the device, we had some initial proof of concept, we had a good team, and we went back to the founder and we said, we need to progress this, we need to go to the next level. And we've been privileged and lucky to get funded again. And same team as before, we maintain the team, we have our super patient and public involvement behind us, and we're going towards CE marking. We're trying to run a multi-center clinical efficacy study, and we're looking at how to actually manufacture seriously this thing and how to commercialize it. This all seems such an easy story. There are external factors in our journey that you can't control. We hit the change from the Medical Device Directive to the Medical Device Regulations, which is coming first this year, I think, which complicated the life quite considerably from the point of view of generating the evidence that is needed to pass the regulatory stage. You will have heard of Brexit, whereby the notified bodies in this country had a very tough time. At some point, they were not even taking bookings. And now we have the problem of the CE and UK CA marks to do. And the other thing that you will have noticed is COVID. COVID has hit really hard our clinical trial because of most of the trust had to dedicate staff and time to COVID and COVID research. So that has been something we couldn't control, and we'll come out of it. But we've had our hiccups along the way. And that's a bit of my story. I couldn't touch on all the points. There's one final thought that I wanted to share with you, and again, it's completely personal. Our industry, the industry of the research, the innovation, the academic, I think in these times is projecting this image of the superhero. There is this academic investigator, clinician academic, that is omnipotent, can do anything, can break down every barrier, knows everything. And that is just not how most of us are. I know a couple of these people, but most of us are actually absolutely normal. And I am absolutely married to the NIHR Astridge leadership, ordinary hero philosophy. I've been through the course. I've been lucky to be taken on when he was on with George Vinny, and who's written that book down on the right, which I would recommend if you haven't read it. Is the Living Leadership. And recognizing that we are absolutely ordinary heroes, we have some really good ideas, but we can't do everything. So we need to get real. The book is get real. So understand your skills and your limitations, and understand the environment where you are about to go with this translational innovation. Get connected. So build the relationship with all those involved. You just really need to buy coffees to people. It was a bit more difficult in the past few months. We couldn't meet people, but along the way, you really need to build relationships with the people that need to help you, build a team that is unbeatable, and get help. Roy was saying how many bodies there are there to help. The NIHR i4i office is full of really good people that are ready to answer questions. There is RDS, there is IHSN, and there are consultancies for the regulatory processes. You can't do it on your own. But if you have a really good idea and you definitely get real connected and get the right help, then you should be funded. So that's my final thought. And I will stop sharing my screen. I think Roy wants the microphone back.